Today we are creating a cinematic teleportation scene in Blender 3D, where a virtual character's body materializes from digital particles and drops into the scene through a portal. We'll build the entire effect using geometry nodes, and it's also a great example for us to explore simulation zones for the first time in this series. Along the way, we'll pull in a few downloaded Scifi assets and make a simple background around this, set up lighting, and finish everything with a clean render. So this is Ram from CrossMind Studio. Let's dive in. To begin this scene, we'll start by bringing in a pre-made character from mixamo.com. From character section, I have chosen this character. It's on page number 2. So once you have selected your character, simply go to animation section. You can type in a keyword here. So this animation looks nice, but it's sort of swinging. So instead of that, maybe something simpler like this would do. This looks perfect. So once you have decided your character and animation, simply click on download, and from here choose FBX format 30 frames per second with skin. Once that is done, go to import section inside Blender and choose FBX, and here in the downloaded section we should be able to find our jump animation. So we have our character here. So yeah, it's already picking up all the textures and all since this is FBX format. Now one more thing, in this collection there are plenty of other things like this armature data is there. What we need to do is we just need to separate out mesh data. Simply select the body, face and hair, the main important 3 parts, and make a new collection by pressing M. Now this way we have a new collection that we can use in geometry nodes without other things interfering with it. This character seems to be working fine, it's just that the animation is a bit short. I wish there was a bit of idle animation right after character stands back. So what we can do here is, just like how we have imported this character's animation, we can import another FBX file from Mixamo itself. I found another idle animation, it's called Look Around. So this is what you'll see. We have this one motion capture and there is another one right here. It's just that this character, if I go to pose mode, the position doesn't match with our character. So we can simply go to graph editor, and if I check which axis this is, it's a Z axis. I'm simply going to push Z axis up to match our character, something like this. And then I'll simply hide this entire collection. And now if I go to dope sheet and bring action editor here. So this is our first action, which is landing animation. All right. Now I'll make another window here. This is going to be our non-linear animation editor. So what I'll do is I'll take this existing animation and push it down to the non-linear animation editor. Once that is done, here we can bring in our new animation and a new slot. So simply choose this armature Mixamo 001 and this armature 001 in the slot. And now we see this second animation in the action editor. And same thing we'll see here as well. This action has been added to our armature, but we still need to push it down so that we can mix it in non-linear animation editor. Now we have both the animations here, first one and second one. First one we can't see right now because this second layer is sort of overriding it. So instead of hold, if you press N here, this side property panel, instead of hold, change this to nothing. And now we have both the animations. There's a bit of jerk here, so you can simply blend in a bit. There should be a line which represents how much blending is happening. So it's not a perfect animation, but it's still decent enough. All right. So once that is done, go back to timeline. And here we can delete this second character's hierarchy. Just right click on this collection and delete hierarchy. Since we already have its animation, we can delete it, turn off this armature and get rid of this nonlinear animation editor. Bring in our timeline back. Now let's start adding some effects to it. So our first step is done. I'm simply going to hide this and create one new geometry. Create anything for now. It doesn't matter because we are going to create a geometry node network on this and get rid of this input node. And instead in this, bring one collection info node and select our character from this and plug this into our group output. Now within this collection there are three objects: hair, body and head. Now to make it one unified mesh, I'm going to bring realize instances, and after that bring one mesh to volume node, and this will convert our mesh to volume. Now let's distribute few points inside the volume, not on the faces, because this is volume object. Now in the distribution method, instead of random, let's make it grid, and instead of 0.3, let's make it 0.1. I'm manually typing values here because if I accidentally scrub it too much, Blender might crash if I add too many points. 0.05. I'm not adding too many points because I don't want this to be a really granular effect. Instead, later on, I will be distributing few cubes on these points. Make it look like more of a digital chunkier voxels. Now, if you're wondering why I converted the mesh into volume, the reason is simple. I don't want the particles to form only the outer shell of the character. I wanted it to feel like the entire volume of the body is being materializing from the inside out. That is why I'm distributing points throughout the volume and not just the surface. Now let's add some animation to it. Here I'm going to bring one simulation zone. And this is what's going to give our points that evolving particle-like behavior. Without it, the points would just regenerate on every frame and never build up into an effect we want. So let's disconnect this and plug this here and here. And within this, we are going to add some motion. Now here's the thing, we have generated all these points. Now before adding this to simulation zone, if I preview this, play the animation, you'll notice that on every frame, there are new particles that appear based on the volume. And that's because the character's mesh is deforming with animation, which creates a new volume on each frame, and Blender keep generating new points inside that updated volume. So as you move through the timeline, new points keep appearing and the previous one disappears. And we don't want that. We want every set of points created on each frame to stay in Blender, building up over time, and almost like a particles trail that record the character's motion. And how this simulation zone is going to help us with that. If I try to put it simply, think of it like a loop. Whatever goes in here gets modified. We are going to add few stuff here and comes out with updated effect. Now that updated geometry again goes back in and the cycle repeats and creates a sort of simulation. And you can see this bracket around it. It's not like other regular nodes. This is a zone. So this sort of represents a closed loop kind of a thing. So now if I play this animation, we just see one set of points. Before this, we had this. But now after the simulation zone, our animation have stopped working. Nothing seems to be happening. The reason behind that is because the behavior is different now. Earlier, these were just few points which were being generated in the volume. But now after going through this simulation zone, it's sort of stuck in a continuous loop. Because earlier we were just playing with normal animation where new points were being generated on each frame. Fresh set of point based on character's new pose. But the moment we plugged in everything inside the simulation zone, those points entered an endless loop. Now if I play this animation here, you'll see it's stuck on the very first frame. The very first set of point from this very first frame went into the simulation zone, and since we haven't added anything here inside the zone yet, they simply come out exact the same. So the system keeps feeding the same set of points back in frame after frame, and the animation outside no longer updates. So animation exists, but it's stuck with the same points. Alright? So let's create a simple trail. What I want is on each cycle of this simulation, which means on each frame, we simply join the geometry. Let's bring a join geometry node. And what are we joining? The new fresh point that this volume generates. I want these to join here. So basically, inside this simulation zone, I'm bringing in all those points generated on each frame. And what this will do if I play this animation now, this sort of creates a trail of animation. All those points from every frame are joining here on each frame. Now let's make it a bit more interesting. After the join geometry node, I'll add one set position node. We have already talked about these nodes in earlier chapters of this series, Geometry Nodes Introduction series. So if you find any part confusing, make sure to go through those lessons in order and it will all make sense. So here in the set position node, we'll add noise texture. I'll add some noise to this animation, giving the particle a nice organic movement instead of staying perfect still. Just remember to disable normalize. That keeps the noise from forcing into one direction and it stays in the center. First of all, I don't want so much of noise, so let's bring one vector math node. Multiply this whole thing, the effect of noise, to 0.03 or something. So that way we can still see the shape of the character, but there is a bit of noise here as well. Now, if you find these points too big, not really creating a good visualization for the preview purpose, simply set point radius for now and plug it here, make it 0.02. I'm going to reduce the radius of it. Now it looks much better. Now, even though we have reduced the noise, I'll also scale down the noise texture, maybe half of it, 2.4 or something. Now this creates much bigger waves. Now here I noticed something. The particles are holding the same wave pattern, the same arc, same pattern for too long. So I figured if I change this texture from 3D to 4D and bring in scene time node. Now once I plug this time value here, now the wave patterns keep shifting instead of staying locked in the same shape as before. But right now it's a bit too much. So maybe I can multiply this or 0.4 or something. This looks alright for now. We can always tweak this later. Now, beside the noise motion, I also want these particles to slightly move upwards every frame. So I'll just add one more vector math node here and change this to add and zero out everything. We just want these particles to move upwards by 0.03 on every frame. So now along with this noise texture, you'll see these particles are moving up. I think that's enough for subtle lift. Maybe we can reduce this even further. So now particles drift upward while also having the same nice wavy animation from the noise texture. Right now what I think is these particles are a bit too much and character readability could get lost in these particles. I think this should be enough. Now after the simulation zone, we are going to instances on points and create simple cube here and plug that in instances. Hide this one and place it here. Now here I'm going to reduce the scale to 0.02 or something. Now this gives us digital voxel-like look we are going for. Now here's the interesting thing. Since this is our first time talking about simulation zone in this geometry node series, and it's important to understand something. It doesn't have physics in simulation by itself, but what it can do is simulate numbers over time. And that's enough to build all kind of effects. For example, let's say we want these particles to shrink as they get older based on the age. So we don't have a dedicated age node, or like in typical particle systems, you have age parameter, density parameter, this and that. But if you think about it, since we can simulate numbers, we can create an attribute called age, and since age is just a number, right? So we can simply make one attribute, store named attribute, and plug this right before the simulation zone, call it age. I'm going to store this on points and leave it 0. And now, since our network have this attribute called age, now if I bring named attribute here, you can see we have age showing up here. That means we can use this attribute and plug this into our simulation zone. But as soon as I plug this inside simulation zone, you can see it appears on the both sides. That's because it's a sort of a loop. Our zone ends here. So age goes in and age comes out of it. All right. So now if I connect this attribute here, inside this, we are going to add something. on each cycle of simulation. Let's say we want these particles to age for a certain amount. Let's say 0.1 for now. So the age attribute goes inside the simulation zone, and 0.1 gets added to it on each cycle of the simulation, and it comes out of here. Now you might be having difficulty visualizing what all is happening. So I'm going to bring a viewer node, Control Shift click here, and then we are going to visualize this value. Control Shift click here again. So if I play this animation, you'll see this gradation going on. So this is basically this attribute. So all these new particles have 0 age, and the more is being added to it, the brighter it gets. So these grayscale values are representing these numbers being added up. So if you want to see the smoother transition, 0.001 or something, maybe not so much. Yeah, now we have a much subtle transition going on. And we can use this attribute to derive this scale parameter here in the instances. But right now it's doing the opposite thing, scaling the new particles down and the opposite side up. So we can map range this. We sort of inverted this effect with map range. Needs a bit more adjustment. All right, so this looks fine. Now these particles will keep emitting on. The simulation will go on forever unless we control it. So near the moment when character finally lands and settles right here, I want these particles to stop emitting and gradually become less dense and fade off smoothly. So I will add one simple multiply node. And around this time, I'll press I on this parameter. First, I'll make it 1, press I. And if I select this node, select this object, you can see the key here. And right after few frames, I'll make it 0.3 or something. So now these particles overall will shrink down when character settles and body starts to sort of form in. And near the end of animation, when the character is fully formed, I'll also animate the density right here. Press I. So about here, I want less of these particles emitting. Maybe, I think I'll have to make it absolute 0 and set a key here. Something like this. Now, one last thing we need to take care of is right here. We can bring one delete geometry node and plug that here. And in this, we are going to use the same value that we have used for scale and plug that into selection. Now, what this is going to do is, right now it's not working. I think we need to realize this geometry, realize instances. Yeah. So based on the age, these particles, which are few frames older, those will automatically delete like this. So this multiply parameter is going to shrink it down, and this delete geometry is going to delete older particles. So instead of, if I disable these, instead of this simulation going on forever, like we can see these particles rising up all the way to the top and taking up all the memory, instead of that, this delete geometry node after a certain age is deleting these particles. All right. So we have these particles. Now we need to start thinking about this animation. If you think about it, this animation begins right at the frame 0 and the particles start simulating at the same time. That makes the sequence feel too sudden. Might would want to add a bit of anticipation in this shot before everything happens. So I'll shift this character's animation. Instead of everything starting jarringly on the frame 0, if I enable this character's bones, so I'll select these bones, go to the pose mode. Right now our animation is in non-linear animation editor, so I'll select both of these and shift these to frame number 100. Now switch back to timeline. So let's say if our shot starts from frame 0, we can have a bit of camera motion, lights go on, then character lands. There's a bit of breathing room to add a bit of anticipation in this shot. Now I'll disable this collection, bring back our character. Now what you'll notice here is, even though we have shifted this animation, this particle simulation starts at the very first frame, and we don't want that. So for that, what you can do is you can either reduce the density to 0 and animate it just like how we did it at the end, or you can create a simple switch node. Let's plug this to true. So the very first form is false. That means there's nothing here. So around frame 99, if I key this switch node here, that means till here we won't see any of these particles. That's because this network, which is false, is empty. If I switch it on, you can see now this one turns green. That means it's taking the second connection and using that for further output. Now we can press I and set key for this again. So we have switch off, switch on, and now if I play this animation, nothing happens till frame 0, and then when character lands in, only then we'll start seeing these particles. And all we need to do is set one material, create one placeholder material. Let's call this one particles and assign that here. So we have our particles. Now we need to also add character's body formation and combine it with this one. So for that, I'm going to simply copy the same thing, collection info node and realize instances, and bring a copy of our character. And now we need something to sort of define the direction of effect. Basically in which direction the effect formation travels. As soon as character lands, we want it to travel in this direction, basically form the feet first, legs, body, and lastly head of this character. So bring one sphere, UV sphere. If I join it with this character, transform geometry, place it right under this character. All right. Now this UV sphere, we can use its proximity. There are many ways to actually make it. You can use a simple gradient or empty point and choose its distance. But I find it much more convenient with the proximity node. Now we have this geometry and we have this proximity data from the UV sphere. You can see a bit of gradation going on here based on the proximity of this sphere. And we can map range this further. I'm going to bring one delete geometry node and delete this character's faces based on this selection. Right now, these values are a bit too faded. I'll have to increase it with map range. So now, like this, it forms this character. I can use this value to create this transition, but right now this proximity data is giving me flat lines. Like you can see there's a flat transition like a vibe. So first of all, I'm going to add one noise texture and add this to max value, reduce its scale. Now this way, instead of flat vibe, this looks much more organic. Now, till here, till the character stands up. So till here, I'll make it 0, something like this. You'll have to work with map range and a bit of figuring out. And then move it all the way. Press I again. There it is. It's a bit too fast. I think we can spread this out till around frame 260 or something. Now we are almost done here, but let's add one more detail. I'll add one extrude mesh node and drive this extrusion using the same value we used for deletion right here. I'll plug this into selection. Now this way, instead of character only appearing, you'll also get a subtle push out effect on the forming faces. Now the effect disappears. You can't really see this extrusion. If I disable this delete geometry, I can see extrusion working. What's happening is the deletion happens first and those faces are instantly removed, and because extrusion is using the same value, it tries to extrude faces that are already deleted and gone. So instead, we'll take the same value and offset it a bit with the help of map range. So we just need a bit of offset like this. So now this way deletion still happens first, but extrusion kicks in on the faces right before they get deleted because of the offset that we have made here. Once sitting on the edge of that transition, we'll have a bit of extrusion. We can actually use a different material on this transition later on to create something interesting and match it to the color of particles. Now we don't need to apply material on this character. It's going to pick it up automatically because it already have material and we haven't done any changes to this mesh. What we'll do here is instead set material here. Right now it's going to override material of everything which is in this network, our character, this extrusion and everything. But what I'll do is instead of that, I'll just take the side faces which are coming out of extrusion and apply this material here. I'll create a new material. Let's call this one body illumination. I'll feed that here. Let's give it some glowy color for now. So pretty much done. And one last thing, now we are going to combine both of these. Bring join geometry node, plug that right after the particles and combine this with our character body. Let's see if timings are working fine here. So character lands and body starts building up like this. Here, I think this transition could happen a bit earlier so that feels a bit more connected. Just like that. I think this looks all right. Since we shifted our animation to frame number 100, so a bit of mistake on my part, I haven't shifted this scale animation that was happening for the particle. So it should be, these particles should scale down after the body is formed up like this. And same thing for this animation, density. And here, I think this delete geometry, this as well we need to animate. We can set one key here for particle deletion. At first, we don't want this to be deleting particles much because we want to see this trail. And then around here, we can delete these particles. Set one key here. Yeah, now all we need to do is work on material bit and add a bit of background. Now, before we start working on materials, let's change this to Cycles Render Engine. I'm going to use GPU and 256 samples for preview purpose. Right now, there's nothing in this scene, so maybe we can use HDR in background. Now we have two materials, one for particle, one for body. So let's jump to shader editor. I'm using Cycles Render and viewport shading for now for faster preview while recording this video. So the very first thing I'm going to bring here is a simple shader, translucent, and get rid of this principal BSDF. In this translucent shader, we can use hue saturation value. Now add any color here and we can shift hue of these particles from here. Now instead of flat number, what I want is these particles colors should change based on attribute that we made in geometry nodes. So if I plug that factor here, you will notice a bit of gradation. It might won't be visible at this moment. So maybe we can go back to geometry node and see what is happening. Yeah. So here, store named attribute for these particles right here before the material. I'll call this one age, and in this we can use this age attribute coming out of simulation box and plug that into value. Change this to faces because these are faces, not points. Let's see what's happening here in the shader editor. If I map range this, so it seems like age is working fine. It's just that we need to map range it a bit like this. So I'm going to keep it slightly more bluish, greenish, sort of like a digital particles. This color suits it well. Now, once that is done, we can bring one emission shader and mix it with this translucent shader. And again, based on age factor, we can copy both of these and plug that into the mix value here. If I preview this in viewport, let's try and map range this. Here, if I add one math node and try to shift this, yeah, a bit tricky, but we got this. So here, I'm going to use the same color. Right around the time when character lands here, I want these glowing particles following it. So it would seem like these are digital signals sort of a thing and yet not have materialized. And later on, around this time, we can animate these values and sort of reduce its effect. We can also use this add, animate this, shift this entire thing a bit. Now here around the time character body is forming up, animate this color and match it to color of costume of this character. Something like this. Press I again, set a key, and fade away. Yeah, this looks much better and syncs with our character's formation. So our character animation is pretty much done. We need to add some illumination in this second material as well. So in this emission section right here, I'm going to copy the same color, bluish tint, and increase the strength to about 2 or something. Now what this will do is, if I disable particles for now, so near the particles, whichever faces are forming up, those will have this second material illumination. And this should also affect our particles as well, this illumination. Let's see. Yeah, I can see a bit of effect here. What if we disable world properties? I'm just going to disable background. So computer is acting up a bit weird. Usually it doesn't lag when I'm recording, but let's see. So now the material part is done as well. Now before we render this out, it'll be a bit of wasted effort if we let this such a cool animation play out in an empty background. So there's literally nothing in the background right now. So let's grab something quickly, a couple of models from Sketchfab to give this shot some nice context. Now I grabbed these two models from Sketchfab. This one is pretty simple sci-fi panel or something, and this one as well. Both the links are in the description. Just make sure to read the license and everything before downloading something and using it in your portfolio or work, whether or not it allows it. So both the links are in the description, and these are pretty simple model. You can model these yourself as well. And if I render this out, you can see there's a bit of texture here. There's some basic texture to it. Feel free to explore and try and look for something which suits your taste. All right, place this one right here under this character. Actually, I was looking for something sci-fi portal kind of thing, so these were the keywords I searched for on Sketchfab. Now this thing right here, so for this model I'm simply going to Shift D, place it here, Shift R a few times to make an array out of it without modifier. Now I'm going to join all of these, move these things to new background collection. So what I did was I placed one here and one at the top. Let's create one simple camera. For this camera, enable camera to view and set the view to something like this. First, I'm trying to find a viewpoint, and around that, I'll create this background instead of putting efforts everywhere, which will go unnoticed. So this seems fine. I'll also make one vertical pillar like this. So since there won't be much of light in the background, I think we can use the same pillar and place a few of these right here. Now let's see how it looks in render. Bring scene world in the shader editor. I'll go to the world and change this background to black so that there is no light gray color emitted from the background. Now let's go to the object. This portal that we have brought in, it does have some bit of emission map going on. We can use this as well to add a bit of light to our scene. It looks good. If I play this animation, you'll notice this won't be enough in itself to light up our scene. So I'm simply going to bring one area light and place it right at the top of our character. This will be our main light with plenty of power. Let's move it to a new collection, lights. This light is working fine, but I find the particles are not really catching this emission shader that we have applied to it. Maybe we need to increase its intensity to 5. Yeah, and play around with these values. Maybe we can use one multiply node here. So here we can keep the intensity slightly more. And here we can tone it down like this. I'm just animating these values. I want this emission to only work on early stage of animation. I'm going to get rid of add value animation. Let's see if we can make it better. Set one key here. Set one key here. And after that, I don't think we need that much emission because particles are sort of solidifying, and we'll start seeing more of color from the character itself rather than seeing too much of illuminated particles. So it seems fine. Let's see. For light, I'll make one more copy right here and make it slightly reddish. Light is a bit isolated, so I can make it red. Scale it up a bit. We can also use denoiser for now. I'll copy this character's light at the top and make one more copy and place it right here near the head of this character. We want to see more of silhouette for this character. And in background, I don't want to add much. I just want to keep something really close to these surfaces so that it only affects those points, maybe 10 intensity. And if I keep it near these surfaces and point it towards it, then let's see how it looks. Intensity is still a bit too much. Maybe we can have multiple of these lights. Let's see if it can capture some details from these sci-fi panels. Now we can also add few lights underneath, maybe one more copy of this array for a pathway. We can place this and maybe add one light here. Now pretty much done. I may have to tweak light a bit so it doesn't work out perfectly during the recording section. There's a lot more time I had to put to correctly place these lights. So I'll keep the both version of the files on Gumroad if you want to see tutorial version recording section and the one that I used for the render. Here we can also make some vertical lights like this and these could maybe create some longer light streaks. For camera, we can also use a bit of depth of field. I'll create one simple point here, right here, a simple empty point, and use this empty point for center of focus, empty, and reduce the f-stop. So although we have some lights, let's see how it looks for character. Once character is fully formed up right here, we can definitely use some more fill light. This part right here need a bit more light. We can use a slight hint of ambient blue shade and keep it near character surface so that it doesn't affect background, but just this much part. And we can also use one intense light at the back for creating a nice rim for this character. If it's too much, maybe we can reduce intensity to 50. Yeah, something like this. And one last thing, let's create one mesh circle. And I'm going to extrude these edges upwards all the way to create this closed chamber. If I apply material here instead of something solid, what if we add one simple noise texture to its alpha? Press Ctrl T for mapping coordinates. So here definitely we can map range this. Now this chamber I want to use for a few faint highlights so it feels connected. At the same time it's picking up some reflections from the background and in itself it doesn't look like a solid form. And this noise texture we can animate like this while this teleportation is going on. Let's see which axis gives better result. Something like this. So let's say when character from frame 1, right about here we set one key, and by the time character is fully formed up we animate these values and these stop here. All right, so it's more like maybe there's some energy or something which is traveling in this chamber. We can't really see solid form. There's a hint of motion around this chamber, which I think might look good. Later in render, we'll see. And I'm surprised Eevee is showing a decent render as well. So shade smooth this. Yeah. So pretty much done. I feel camera is a bit too far from this character. I can zoom in a bit. Yeah. So right about here, I'm going to set a key for this alpha node and the character starts to appear at frame 100. So before that, maybe I can reduce its opacity, make it 0. Now what I'm thinking is for this portal surface, we have emission strength. We can do the same thing for this as well. It sort of lights up right before character jumps in. Before that, we can have its emission turned off. So just feel free to play around with it. Maybe we can have one slightly larger light, neutral color, scaled up, pointed towards the background. So that's about it for now. And so we have light and everything set up. Now the only thing I'm thinking of is to add some camera motion. I'll bring one simple circle and select our camera, which is right here, and select this circle. Press Ctrl P and this will make it parent. Keep offset. And now if I rotate this camera, this is going to give us nice cinematic motion. This camera is sort of moving in an arc. Right about here, create one key and start from left side and slowly move towards the right. Maybe in center or something. Just trying to improve composition. Let's see how it looks. If you want to improve your preview in the viewport, just switch it to Eevee, enable ray tracing, and in advanced you have this light threshold. You can play with it and go back to cycles. Now you get best of both worlds. You have this nice preview in the viewport itself and you get this nice render with cycles. So for final render, I think 400 samples for this simple scene should be enough. I added a few more particles at the top which sync with this character's animation. So using the exact same method, if you create a curved circle or mesh circle and apply the same geometry node setup, you can create those particles. You can also check out project files if you want. So that's about it. You can see this is the final render and there might be a bit of difference in colors here and there, but it's exactly the same setup. It's just that during the recording session I had to redo everything, so that creates a bit of difference. But I'll leave both the files in geometry node file section on Gumroad. All the previous files are also there if you want to play with the final set of files. So have fun with it, try different animations, different characters, and experiment with the same simulation method to create completely new kind of effect. It's actually a very simple setup, probably one of the easiest ways for beginners to start playing with the simulation zone inside geometry nodes and still create something really exciting. And this topic is covered in more detail in our latest course, which we released a few months ago. You can find the link in the description with discount coupon. There's also a course trailer which gives you a run through of entire thing. The thing about this course is it shows you, instead of getting into really complex methods, how you can use your daily existing simple thinking that you apply in everyday models and convert that into node trees and make simple things which can accelerate your daily production. So if you like this video, check out the course details. Links are in the description and use the discount code provided. There's also a full trailer on this channel, and if you enjoyed this, give it a like and subscribe. YouTube doesn't always show the full playlist, so if you are new to geometry nodes, check out the previous chapters in the series. And if you're a beginner, completely new to geometry node, I would suggest that you watch the series in correct order to make the most out of it. And some of the nodes have been changed in geometry nodes network. That's completely alright. I have mentioned those changes in pinned comment and description, so you won't have trouble following along, and this series is still relevant to the current version of Blender. And also, if you're just starting out with Blender, our free beginner series, which recently crossed 5 million views, is still one of the best places to begin learning Blender. And if you're looking for more in-depth content, check out my premium courses on Gumroad and Superhive Market, which was previously known as BlenderMarket. They are on sale and a lot of students have found them super useful. You can see the students' work here as well. There are plenty more useful playlists on this channel as well. Be sure to check those out. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.